れがウルトラマン。霞が関の独立グ連隊へようこそ。
We are talking Shin Ultraman, and this is the kind of latest kaiju movie to come out of Japan. Now, Ultraman is a property that I actually really enjoyed when I was a young child. We used to get the VHS of the original kind of Japanese, badly dubbed versions, and I used to enjoy them greatly when I was a kid. But it's not something I've really kind of kept up with, and I know the Ultraman series has had a few incarnations over the years, and obviously it has a dedicated fan base. Arguably, you could say it's not as well known as, for example, Godzilla, which is probably the most well known kind of kaiju type kind of property. But you've also got things like Gamera as well. So here we are with Shin Ultraman, which is essentially a kind of reboot, so to speak, for a new audience, a new modern audience. And what's the story? Well, it focuses actually on a group of individuals that have been put together by the Japanese government because there have been various emergences of these kaiju kind of appearing sometimes out of nowhere, and they've got this government agency which is designed to try and find weaknesses and ultimately kind of kill the kaiju. And we've had a variety of these kind of kaiju turn up. We kind of get a kind of montage at the beginning, and there's some pretty interesting kind of kaiju that kind of turn up, and we get a flavour of these this kind of government group are able to figure out how to ultimately kill the majority of these kind of kaiju, but it's happening more frequently, and there's bigger and badder kind of kaiju afoot. Now, on one particular kind of attack, we see the appearance of Ultraman, a kind of Power Rangers-esque kind of style giant humanoid that turns up, who seems to be benevolent and actually is defending humankind, and he appears to be an extraterrestrial and is able to fight off a number of kind of kaiju attacks. Then we have extra threats from an extraterrestrial source, as we have various aliens also coming to threaten humanity. What will happen? You'll have to watch the movie and find out. So obviously this follows on from the Shin Godzilla, which was obviously the kind of the more gritty, if you can take it, remake of kind of Godzilla. This one is not, I would say, gritty, but it has a kind of a tongue-in-cheek flavour to it. But it's obviously designed from to essentially to bring in new audience members, whilst I think trying to have some appeal for existing kind of fans as well. Does it succeed? Well, I'm going to say when this movie first started off, I was quite encouraged. The bold intro with these various kind of montages of different kind of kaiju sets up the kind of the scene, and we kind of get some just quite funny dialogue. Really, that only seems to happen in Japan. Why does this all only seem to happen in Japan? Things like this, and the kind of the formation of this kind of team of kind of misfits to a certain degree to try and kind of combat it, but they seem competent, which I kind of quite like. They seem like they're kind of good at their job, so to speak. And obviously when we get our first appearance of Ultraman, we don't know if he's a friend or a foe, and I quite like that. The effects are kind of knowingly hokey. Now, arguably, I would suggest that Ultraman is a little less believable as a concept than maybe Godzilla. Not that I'm saying Godzilla is a believable concept, but with the aesthetics of Ultraman is basically a huge Power Ranger kind of type. It's like, how do you make this kind of realistic? You don't really. So you basically just kind of give him practically the kind of the same kind of look as he's always kind of had, and we just stick him in there. And obviously back in the kind of the good old days, it was kind of men in suits. Nowadays it's mainly kind of CGI, and the effects aren't great, but I think it's kind of okay to a certain degree. with this movie because, you know, Ultraman's never been one for great effects exactly, you know. Yeah, okay, there might have been fun and passable, obviously, back in the kind of the good old days, but, you know, obviously, they're never really considered realistic effects. And I think that this movie kind of does do a job of updating them and still making them fun without necessarily going too kind of realistic. And it has this, as I say, this kind of tongue-in-cheek kind of feel to it. I quite enjoyed our characters. I think our characters are our sort of team of you know, experts and kind of government agents are all quite really, you know, kind of fun and quite well developed. You know, we got the geeky guy who's really into kind of Star Trek and things like this. You've got the kind of the workaholic woman, their kind of more stoic boss. There's kind of this guy who may or may not have a connection to kind of Ultraman, things like this. You know, and I kind of quite enjoyed their kind of characters. I thought there's some quite interesting turns that they take, especially with one of our newer ones, who's this female kind of new recruit who's kind of partnered with this mysterious kind of guy. And there's obviously some fun action sequences with various kind of like smackdowns with different types of monsters and aliens and different kind of powers. Essentially, Ultraman is like a giant superhero. So it doesn't work. I have to say, I think the problem with this film, for me at least, is this is a relatively simple story, but it's simple but also incredibly convoluted at the same time, and also has a bad case of the repeatos. You know, so the concept here is that these kaiju are coming up because, you know, the Earth is trying to kind of fight back against humanity's onslaught of its own planet, so to speak, which is fair enough. You know, we get the first kind of Ultraman versus Kaiju scene. We get the second one, you know, it's all good. It's all good, you know, it's kind of what you're paying for. And then we have these, like a gauntlet of alien invaders. And it just seems to be like, did we really need multiple different alien invaders? And it just kind of like, you feel like it's really treading water on a narrative sense. Now, you might not care, you might just want to see kind of big costumed aliens and monsters smackdown. But if you want a story, then it just seems to make it unnecessarily complicated, particularly with kind of the alien side of things. Giving them these kind of motivations and things like this, and like one of them is kind of very duplicitous. Another one seems to be kind of like, oh well, you know, humanity just can't survive and blah blah blah. And then we get another one as well. It's kind of like, I don't know if we really needed all of that. Maybe we could have had one alien kind of attack and just maybe had a little bit more in regards to the kind of the story development. It just seemed to be cramming too much stuff in. And then we have the kaiju. Once the aliens start showing up, the kaiju, they're just forgotten about. They don't show up again. You know, oh, well, that's dealt with, so they don't show up again. I mean, I'm guessing maybe it could be for a sequel, but it just seems like, well, you know, we have this new threat. The old threat just seems to have taken care of itself. It's like, well, you know. And then in the story elements itself, and especially in regards to kind of Ultraman, his kind of origin and his relationship with both alien forces and the kind of humanity, again, it just seems convoluted in the way it's kind of being told as a story. Now, admittedly, this is a Japanese movie and I watched the subtitled version, so stuff may have got lost in translation, but I don't know how much. It just seems to be, the story seems to be somewhat kind of thrown together, I have to say. Another critique that I have seen on this movie is the CGI. Now, I told you I think the effects are a little bit kind of like, you know, ropey in this one. And I think in a way, because of the background of this kind of property, you can kind of just put it down to part of its kind of charm, part of its kind of cheesy charm. But I'll be remiss for not saying that, yeah, the CGI here kind of looks like cartoons in some scenes at least. There are sequences where I think it works pretty well. And I think some of it is also done practically, but there are scenes here where the CGI really just does look like a cartoon. And that to me has been the main complaint that I've kind of read, and like I've said, I kind of put it down to this property it has always been a bit hokey, so it's kind of almost paying homage to that, not, you know, and the concept is so silly, you know, how can you realistically make a kind of somewhat realistic version? But it has been the chief complaint that I've seen outside of what I think, so there you go. The ending is also incredibly abrupt. Again, I wonder if this was down to it wanting to have a sequel, or things just being cut out for kind of the release. I don't know, but it's in a very, very abrupt kind of situation, and things are brought into this story, which I won't spoil for you. But we kind of get an Attack of the 50-Foot Woman style scenario here that really doesn't really have any type of impact on the story necessarily. Again, it's one of these ideas that are brought in that I never really feel resulted in much, and it's just a kind of a means to kind of like, oh, look, let's give the aliens some type of kind of motivation, but it's very convoluted. Overall, I have to say I enjoyed the start of this movie, and I thought it was set up was pretty fun. But then it kind of just buckles under its own weight, wanting to kind of add layers and layers and layers of kind of repeated material. Like I said, it's not like it's not buckling under a very complex plot, but it's buckling under lots of plot points that seem to more or less repeat what the last one was doing, but added the kind of slightly new twist, which I didn't think was particularly good, and therefore comes across as you know, you're kind of shortchanged in some of the kind of like the development that all these different kind of threats and plot lines should have brought. So to me, this was story-wise a little bit of a mess. On a technical aspect, I think it's not going to please everyone, but it still has a fun element. Like I said, I quite enjoyed the character still, and there are elements here that you can enjoy if you just want to see a huge kind of like monster smackdown. But I'll give it a 5 out of 10. I wasn't super blown away with it, to be honest with you. Have you seen it? What did you think of it? Leave me a comment, and I shall look forward to seeing you next time. Bye for now.